The Fourth Way Up. Author Anatoly Romanovich Arlashin. This audio version differs from the handwritten book in that the author adds some information in some places, where necessary, to expand the text and make it easier to understand. Preface. The Fourth Way is the path of developing consciousness in an urban setting. George Ivanovich Gurdjieff was the most famous conductor of the teachings of the Fourth Way in the 20th century. This book is food that can be your spiritual bread, if you manage to digest it. What is offered here is not magic recipes, but methods of working on yourself. For the development of consciousness, such doing has never been easy. The purpose of this book is to try to help people seeking knowledge about developing their consciousness in an urban setting. There is a certain number of intentionally unfinished points in this book. This is the tradition of the Fourth Way teachings, encountering the second and seventh components of the naluonic spectrum of impulses. This is an obscure phrase from Gurdjieff's book, Conversations of Beelzebub with his grandson Hussein. However, there is no doubt that the inquisitive mind of the seeker of truth will not be confused by this. You should not believe anything said in this book. Be sure to test everything from your own experience. Make your faith conscious. Use the principle of the Fourth Way. Know, feel, do. Sidewalks are paved with truths, said the ancients. Knowledge is only worth anything when it has become part of our innermost being. Only then will a person be able to realize the knowledge gained. Our world is full of teachings about developing consciousness in one way or another. Some lead to God, some to the devil, some to nowhere. It's hard to sort out what's what. In this regard, it is explicitly stated that the Fourth Way leads to restoring our lost openness to God. It is a psychological teaching that allows us to recapture the joy and love without which it is so difficult to live on earth. Here, it does not matter what religion you follow or what nationality you belong to. Gurdjieff said, "There are no Russians, Jews, Armenians, or Ethiopians here. There are people here who want to evolve in essence. There is one God behind the symbols of every religion. Names aren't the point. It is important that your heart be filled with love for all creatures created by the Creator. Then religions or doctrines will not divide people as they did before, and do now, but unite them. Power-hungry and greedy people, who differed only in appearance from beasts of prey, used people's faith in God to incite hatred and wars of conquest. They planted their faith by fire and sword, and did not shy away from robbing converts. All this reflects the constant inner conflict between the lower and higher natures of man, or, in the language of the Fourth Way, between the lower and higher control centers of the psyche. Every religion has tried, in one way or another, to help man overcome this inner disharmony. But unlike fairy tales, on our planet, evil triumphed over good. And this state of affairs is not accidental. According to the law of creation, we are a considerable distance from the source of harmony in this place of the universe. Disharmony and chaos prevail. A person always faces a choice, but which path to take? Unconsciousness and violence, or consciousness and love? On the Fourth Way, the choice is to increase awareness and cultivate divine love in one's heart. You make your choice, but be sincere, because people's words, feelings, and deeds are located in different mental centers and do not necessarily coincide. The Fourth Way of spiritual development is practical and realistic. What does that mean? This suggests that you should act with knowledge and experience in any endeavor. For a person to develop, he must know not only the structure of his body and its functioning on many levels, but also the real state of the human machine. In this case, it is clear what failures the machine gives and how to eliminate such malfunctions. In addition, the core knowledge of the fourth way allows us to know and understand all possible structures of our world and the place of human beings in it. The fourth way combines the best psycho-techniques developed in other spiritual traditions and is suitable for working on oneself in an urban setting. This is the specificity of the fourth way. On the other paths, a lot depends on the teacher. The disciple must mechanically and thoughtlessly do whatever he is shown and ordered. This state of affairs is unacceptable to people seeking to develop consciousness. The fourth way has little to say about God. It has concepts such as the absolute and consciousness as a primordial property of matter. It is also said that the mind of the Son is divine in relation to us, yet somehow there are few emotional appeals to love God here. And what about the fulfillment of the main thesis of the fourth way, about the use of psycho-techniques from other paths of spiritual development? The realism of the fourth way is that urban man, overwhelmed by a mass of lies, negative emotions and pride, cannot truly love God while being deeply psychologically closed. Modern man is incapable of opening himself essentially to God. Every possible form of fear constrains the hearts of contemporaries, and the imaginative attempt to love God by such people in their ordinary state of consciousness is reduced to imagination or pretense. That kind of love is worthless. Will God hear such a false heart? Only a person who has purified his spiritual heart can distinguish between idle talk and truth. Such a seeker of truth opens himself to God. Adepts of the fourth way who have achieved direct perception of God speak of the experience as follows. I communed with the Son of truth, wisdom, and love. Communion with God purifies the soul, gives real wisdom and knowledge, and reveals the essential purpose of a particular person's life. It is a state of direct knowledge of the essence of things. Yogis call this perception of information apta. At this level of consciousness, understanding occurs due to direct perception of the essence of phenomena by the higher psychic centers. Realistically, for most modern people, God has become some unattainable abstraction. Although, as deeply spiritual people know, the main principle of God is maximum accessibility to people. God is the source of real spiritual knowledge and wisdom for people following the fourth way. That is why their heart, their emotional center, must be purified from all kinds of negative emotions, such as pride. Most of the problems of our time stem entirely from the disconnection of people from God. Man perceives the absence of divine love as a terror of inner emptiness and loneliness. This terror often develops into a sense of the meaninglessness of existence. It's one of the leading causes of suicide. In an attempt to protect himself from the horrors of inner emptiness, a man places the image of a beautiful self instead of God in his heart. This lying to oneself is pride. It is masked by various words of pride, self-esteem, authority, knowledge, diplomas, degrees, and so on. Without the knowledge of God, human life is only vanity. It is empty, sorrowful, and hopeless. People deprived of such spiritual support try to drown their pangs of longing by drinking wine, taking drugs, hoarding huge sums of money, gaining power over others, or using any other form of putting their troubled minds to sleep. This world is overflowing with material wealth, yet it is always in short supply. Still not enough. Without having conscious contact with God, people do not even guess that their essence is a particle of God, that all people on the divine level are one whole, and that the real value of this and other worlds is consciousness as a creative manifestation and power of the Father Creator. Jesus Christ, who was a man number 8, according to Gurdjieff, who had fantastic power over the world, did not turn his torturers into dust precisely because he felt his deep spiritual unity with the essences of all men. Jesus Christ was only in human form like men, being in reality the representative of the divine mind. He needed this form to communicate properly with people. However, not only ancient but also modern man is not ready to interact with other forms of consciousness. When it comes to turning to God, the process is not easy, even for a prepared person. Man is too identified with his selfish interests. His requests have, at times, such a strange appearance that God either does not respond to the request or teaches the visitor a good lesson. Some people try to make God their helper or servant. This is an important point for selfish people. God loves those people who genuinely love Him. Such loving hearts receive much from God. Consider how Christian saints received their extraordinary qualities. These magical abilities are the grace of God given in accordance with their humble service to the Lord. The fourth way also utilizes the techniques of esoteric Christianity. Only the traveler of the fourth way, who has passed all the preliminary stages of training, can make real contact with God. These include complete neutralization of blocks of negative emotions, sustained self-remembering, neutralization of false personality, overcoming selfishness, high levels of focus, and more. Therefore, the fourth way suggests that people first bring their mental mechanisms to a normal state, enabling them to truly love God wholeheartedly. There's no way you can learn that from books. This training is only possible in groups led by people who have achieved real results. The teachings of the fourth way are always against mystification, the exploitation of people's imagination. The herald of the fourth way in the 20th century, Gurdjieff, pointed out that one of the fundamental qualities of matter is the property of consciousness. From this point of view, the whole world is an information system, or better said, an organism. We see nothing surprising in the information processes we observe in different organisms or between different beings. Our perception of different levels of consciousness is primarily limited by the degree of our own development. Uspensky, a disciple of Gurdjieff, was struck by the fact that Gurdjieff spoke of the sun and planets as living beings. A highly evolved person can communicate informationally with higher and lower forms of consciousness and beings. For him, unlike less evolved humans, the whole world is alive. The self-realized spirit of man has considerable power over matter, space, and time. What seems unbelievable to one level of consciousness is quite a common reality to a more evolved being. The wonders of our civilization evoke a mystical horror in savage tribes. An unusual phenomenon produced by people with advanced consciousness is similarly shocking to civilized people, although it is not unattainable or mystical. People open their eyes as they grow and know why they live and what they must do in this life. All that is said here about attaining a real perception of God is the experience of travelers on the fourth way. Success in the spiritual field depends on the sincerity of our search and understanding of ourselves. Sincerity is up to you. The knowledge to understand yourself you will gain in this book. You can only turn knowledge into understanding by working hard on yourself in a group of like-minded people. Introduction. This knowledge is for those who see that life around them creates substantially more mysteries than it solves. Those for whom neither money, fame, nor the pleasure of the body is the meaning of life. It is also for those seekers of truth who are theoretically already familiar with the fourth way of consciousness development, thanks to Ouspensky's books In Search of the Miraculous and The Fourth Way. This manual is a preparatory guide for people who intend to step on the fourth way or the path of self-development of the city dweller. Metaphorically, this representation is only a path leading to the fourth way. Only a person who has irrevocably, at the level of his essence, decided on the direction of his spiritual development, a man number 4, can really follow the fourth way. However, despite this very serious introduction, the ideas of the fourth way will be useful to every thinking person, especially to people in creative professions. Although, as life shows, any profession can be creative. In this book, for the first time, some objective laws that academic science has only speculated about are unfolded and openly given in detail. One can apply these laws to any field of human endeavor. At the same time, I would like to warn some people against a frivolous approach to working on the system of the fourth way under the guidance of experienced mentors. If you are lucky enough to find them, you will come to a point of re-evaluating your life. Then you will realize that the fourth way is not a game or a fairy tale. It will be painful and will require a significant mobilization of your energies. Are you ready for this? If your spouse does not share in your work on yourself, a spiritual chasm may form between you after a while, leading to a breakdown in your relationship. Have you thought about that? The actual practice of the fourth way does not match the imagination of most people who yearn for spiritual development. And you may be one of them. Maybe you need to find a path that coincides with your imagination of the path. The essence of the fourth way is expressed by the quotation from the book In Search of the Miraculous. In the ordinary conditions of cultured life, the position of a man, even of an intelligent man, who is seeking for knowledge, is hopeless because, in the circumstances surrounding him, there is nothing resembling either fakir or yogi schools, while the religions of the West have degenerated to such an extent that for a long time there has been nothing alive in them. Various occult and mystical societies and naive experiments in the nature of spiritualism and so on can give no results whatever. And the position would indeed be hopeless if the possibility of yet a fourth way did not exist. The fourth way requires no retirement into the desert, does not require a man to give up and renounce everything by which he formerly lived. The fourth way begins much further on than the way of the yogi. This means that a man must be prepared for the fourth way, and this preparation must be acquired in ordinary life and be a very serious one, embracing many different sides. Furthermore, a man must be living in conditions favorable for work on the fourth way, or in any case, in conditions which do not render it impossible. It must be understood that both in the inner and in the external life of a man there may be conditions which create insuperable barriers to the fourth way. Furthermore, the fourth way has no definite forms, like the ways of the fakir, the monk, and the yogi. And first of all, it has to be found. This is the first test. It is not as well known as the 3 traditional ways. There are many people who have never heard of the fourth way, and there are others who deny its existence or possibility. At the same time, the beginning of the fourth way is easier than the beginning of the ways of the fakir, the monk, and the yogi. On the fourth way, it is possible to work and to follow this way while remaining in the usual conditions of life, continuing to do the usual work, preserving former relations with people, and without renouncing or giving up anything. On the contrary, the conditions of life in which a man is placed at the beginning of his work, in which, so to speak, the work finds him, are the best possible for him, at any rate, at the beginning of the work. These conditions are natural for him. These conditions are the man himself, because a man's life and its conditions correspond to what he is. Any conditions different from those created by life would be artificial for a man, and in such artificial conditions, the work would not be able to touch every side of his being at once. Then the fourth way differs from the other ways in that the principal demand made upon a man is the demand for understanding. A man must do nothing that he does not understand except as an experiment under the supervision and direction of his teacher. The more a man understands what he is doing, the greater will be the results of his efforts. This is a fundamental principle of the fourth way. The results of work are in proportion to the consciousness of the work. No faith is required on the fourth way. On the contrary, faith of any kind is opposed to the fourth way. On the fourth way, a man must satisfy himself of the truth of what he is told, and until he is satisfied, he must do nothing. Here we have given this long quotation to show one of the essences of the fourth way. The designation of self as we is conscious and intentional because, according to fourth way teachings, the human biocomputer contains a formidable number of programs that scream, I. Each one of them screams, I do. And we want readers to feel the spirit of the fourth way every time they encounter the phrase we. The fourth way asserts that man has no inner wholeness. The human psyche is multiple and mosaic. Thousands of human computer programs act as representatives of the whole person in one activity or another. The individual does not even imagine such chaos in himself. Some IS make decisions, others don't follow them because they know nothing about the decisions. Man is always up against the accusation of his plurality. Here, we would add that only external observation of another person, mind you, another person, can give insight into seeing that person suddenly jump from one bunch of programs calling themselves I, to another. At the same time, he does not notice it at all. He does not even suspect it. And when he is told this, he is either surprised or outraged. Only through the process of observation does the fourth way student become convinced of the validity of the proposition of his inner chaos. The very observation of one's randomness is impossible without self-remembering. In his late life in the West, Gurdjieff gave very little knowledge, but was much engaged in psychological experiments, in the constant staging of Oriental dances, and in the preparation and transportation of the people ready for further development to the Eastern monastery. This change can be attributed to a change in the master's attitude to his doing. If in Russia before 1917 it was possible to create a school of the fourth way, in France, Gurdjieff, in his own words, only did psychological research and testing. He was testing the possibility of realizing the fourth way system in the society of the time. We would add that in Western society at that time. After all, the society of the West and the society of Russia differed significantly even in those times, and even more so now. Uspensky emphasized that the teachings of the fourth way are far ahead of their time. At that time, scientific disciplines and, consequently, concepts that could accurately explain the meaning of most of the ideas of the fourth way had not been formed in the public consciousness. The situation has changed due to the emergence of a large amount of knowledge regarding a special quality of matter, information. That is, notice that Gurdjieff also denoted information as matter. He said that everything in the world is material. One more remark. The teachings of the fourth way should not be confused with other paths of consciousness development. Some fashionable teachings, and there are legions of them, claim the highest knowledge. The founders of these new ways followed the precepts of one American version of the famous con man, Ostap Bender. Their name is Legion. These businessmen called for getting rich by creating new religions. More than once, we had to meet and counsel people who have been psychologically traumatized by the exercises offered by such schools. Sometimes, the leaders of these communities, schools, institutes, and academies declare themselves almost messiahs. However, beautiful words often hide the same unconsciousness and greed. The teachings of Carlos Castaneda should not be mistaken for the fourth way either. About such paths and schools, Gurdjieff said, "There are other schools which use these or similar substances, not for experiment or study, but to attain definite desired results, if only for a short time. Through a skillful use of such substances, a man can be made very clever or very strong for a certain time. Afterwards, of course, he dies or goes mad. But this is not taken into consideration. Such schools also exist. So you see that we must speak very cautiously about schools. By the way, peyote, which contains the drug mescaline and which is consumed in large quantities in some peyote sessions in American and Mexican Indian communities, increases intellectual productivity while simultaneously destroying the body, specifically the liver. The sad fate of Carlos Castaneda is an example of this. The main sources of knowledge regarding the fourth way are the books by Piotr Uspensky, In Search of the Miraculous, and The Fourth Way, The Psychology of Possible Human Evolution. But as Uspensky himself said, here we have given fragments of an unknown doctrine. It is up to you to realize them as a whole in the process. We have been doing this hard work for some time, practicing in groups and individually. In doing so, we have tried to pay attention to important and little understood aspects of the fourth way. We can now offer the results of these activities to help people seriously interested in the theory and practice of the fourth way. It is hard not only to realize the general meaning of work on yourself, but even individual elements of it based purely on the classic works of Gurdjieff, Uspensky, and more recent works by Maurice Nicoll, John G. Bennett, Rodney Collin, Charles Tart, and others.